Deconverted Man here. Let's answer a common theist question that has been posed. And that question is, what harm does it do me to believe in God if that's not true? Even if there isn't a God, so what? Why can't I just believe it? It makes me feel good. I'm a good person. I'm not doing anything bad. I'm not going to do anything bad. So really, why can't you just let me be? Let me believe this? Why do you have to keep attacking it? Why do you have to keep trying to change my mind? Just leave me alone about my belief. What's wrong with me just believing what I want to believe? There's a lot of possible answers to this sort of question. It's kind of hard to answer because, in a way, a belief that somebody holds, an individual, on its own, in isolation, could that cause zero harm to that person? Yeah, it could. So, in a way, you could say, well, there's no harm that it will do. As if harm is the reason that they should believe something or not. Maybe that's the problem with the question, is the belief of having a belief that is going to hurt you, that in and of itself has some wrong ideas in it. Now, certainly I think that we're more tuned towards self-preservation. We see a stove that's on, we're not going to just put our hand on it. We instinctively and reflectively get away from things that we know are going to harm us. So if somebody had a belief that they could put their hand on their stove, and they did it, and they're like, but I still believe I can do it, So, okay, they're gonna hurt themselves in a very obvious manner, but there are people who believe that you can handle snakes without getting bitten, and they routinely handle snakes and routinely get bitten. Now, over time, such an individual might indeed build up an immunity to snake bites, so that even if they get bitten, well, which they will, it won't harm them to the degree that it would harm somebody else. But that's a huge risk you're taking. But I think it is that idea of, well, this belief causes me harm or it doesn't cause me harm, and that somehow makes it valid or invalid. I think that's the core problem. So yes, if I have a belief that putting my hand on the stove isn't going to hurt me, that doesn't necessarily make that belief invalid, even though it is invalid. Because the truth of the matter is, putting my hand on the stove will hurt me. And what I'm talking about here is trying to invalidate the hidden premise that we must grant for this question to be answered. In that the premise of the question is, you will accept the idea that me believing X is going to harm me is good or bad, and therefore X is true or false. And once you've answered the question without unpacking the question and saying, well, maybe it's a loaded question, maybe there's something wrong with the question itself, you've already brought into that premise. And it's a difficult premise to really let go of, because, as I said, we're very much in tune with what harms us and getting away from that harm. But there is beliefs that we can cite that are wrong beliefs, even though the thing is harmful. So if I believe that all harm is bad, then I can't get an injection because that will harm me. It will cause temporary pain. But not doing it will cause more problems because I probably needed that injection. So that belief will cause harm, even though in the short term it won't cause harm. Now, I might be lucky. I might be lucky and never need an injection ever again, but I might not be lucky. So if I'm lucky my entire life and I make it to the end and I never had to take an injection, and I can go, aha, my belief caused me no harm. But it could have. But that doesn't invalidate the belief, nor does it validate the belief. The fact that it did or did not cause me harm in the long term is irrelevant. I submit to you that the problem with this question is more about the premise of that validating an idea as true or false is as simple as asking whether or not it will cause harm to me or others. There was a meme I just saw recently that showed the amount of, and of course I need citations always, and so I hate memes because I don't do that, but it showed the number of people killed during the Muslim Crusades, which I guess you could say are technically still going on, and the Christian Crusades. Well, the Muslim Crusades lasted longer than the Christian Crusades, so I kind of wonder if you did the math if they would even out or not. But nonetheless, the Muslims had way higher numbers than the Christians. And that was it. And it said, any questions? And I'm like, yeah, I've got a lot of questions. Like, what point are you trying to make? Because it's in isolation. Are we saying that if you cause more deaths, or if your group caused more deaths than some other group, that makes your group wrong? Well, no, I'm saying that it makes them more dangerous. You know, and then we can get into, well, you know, does the reason or motivation that I'm killing people matter? You know, you know, and all these sort of things. And I just think it's one ginormous can of worms that all starts with this logical fallacy that I don't know if there's a name for yet, but maybe it needs to become a logical fallacy of buying into the idea that harm or not harm equals true or false. And then that's just, maybe it's association causation fallacy. Yeah. Nonetheless, no, not necessarily. You know, again, a belief that X is true, and if that will never hurt me, still doesn't mean that X is true or false. It says nothing about the truth of the matter. So the question removes all forward discussion about whether X was true. In this case, X was God, but it focuses instead upon potential harm to the individual, which may or may not be relevant. And I posted a long paragraph response to somebody that says, what harm did it do or does it do for me to believe? And I went on and on about how believing a lie can hurt you, that believing that this is true might prevent you from learning, and so on and so forth. And I realized that a lot of the things that I was saying were kind of appeals to consequences. They were valid appeal to consequences, but I had not seen the problem with the question itself. It doesn't mean that you're right. Why do you want to believe? Why believe X at all? That's what we're focusing on, not whether or not it will harm you to believe it or not, but whether it's true or not. So then the question, I suppose, is what does it matter if that belief does or doesn't cause harm to you. And the answer, I suppose, depends upon the theist that you're speaking to. But I wonder what other ways we could approach this question that has been asked so many times in so many different ways, that of, well, what problem? You could also phrase it in a different way, maybe, to try to get away from the harm thing, and say, well, why does it matter that I believe this? And just drop the whole harm bit. And it's like, well, do you want to believe what's true? Maybe they could say, oh, I don't care. I you know. So then what, you know? So what is your idea and your response to that question of what harm does it cause? Or even, why does it matter if I believe X and X is true or false? Why? Who cares? What's it to you? It doesn't affect you, it only affects me. And that might also be true. It might only affect you. That you personally, not anyone else. That if I keep this belief, whatever that is, to myself, I never tell anyone about it, ever, then what's it matter if it's a true or a false belief? If I never act on it, I never do anything about it, I just believe that this thing is true or false, and in reality it isn't, I'm wrong, but I never bothered to look into it because I don't talk about it, I don't share it, whatever, and it's just something that's in my brain. So what? What's the big deal? Why is that such a problem? Can't you just let me have that? What's your response to that? Post your response in text format or video format and link it in the description below. This has been Talking Points, where I point and I talk.